Hello everyone, this is the revision video for Changing Economic World. Now this resource here is not something I've made. I'm not going to lie to you. This is something that you already have access to. If you type in AQA Geography, the Changing Economic World, or Changing Economic World Geography GCSE revision, you'll find things like this. Okay, this is basically an example of a revision material you can use. It is a multi-page document that helps you kind of revise the key ideas around each topic. Now, if you are to not do anything in lesson, no homework, and just watch this video, then you won't pass the subject. Okay, just to confirm that, this is to help you alongside your revision, not replace your revision. And the reason I say that is because this stuff here gives you the basics. If you revise everything in this document, then yes, you can get a grade 4 perhaps. But there's more to it than that. You also have to make sure you have your exam techniques sorted, and you also have to make sure that you have your case studies to support your arguments, because the case studies give the content here the extra level of detail you need for a top mark. Okay, so for example, if you go down, you can see here, development. You start with Changing Economic World, the idea about development. So development is the idea of what a 21st century life should consist of. So basically, to what level is there clean water, electricity, services, opportunities, for example. So in terms of development, you have to know what it is before looking at how you measure it. So how do you measure how developed or not a country is? That I'll be looking at something called economic indicators. Okay, economic indicators. Now this basically helps you see how developed a country is when it comes to its economy, i.e. money, because down here there's also something called social indicators, and that is maybe how developed a country is in terms of its people, in terms of its jobs, in terms of its life. So economic indicators that show how developed a country is include GNI per capita and the poverty line, whereas something social is more about life expectancy, literacy rate, infant mortality rate. They're all to do with people. Now I will leave this on the screen just for a few seconds. You can pause it if you need to. Social and economic indicators of levels of development, i.e. how developed a country is. More developed will have better these, less developed will have worse these. You also have something called environmental indicators, so pollution levels, area of woodland, green space, for example, that show how developed environmentally a country is. The more developed environmentally, the better the environment's going to be, and vice versa. Okay, now this can change, developments can change through technology, because over time countries are becoming more developed. We have also learned that development can be interpreted differently. So for example, some countries might think they're more developed than others. It varies. Now using different measures and indices, basically things you can do to measure development, can result in countries being ranked. Now that's where you have like a league table, the Human Development Index, HDI. Now basically what this does is it gives every country a score between 0 and 1, okay? And it considers a variety of factors like income, inequality, levels of education, life expectancy, etc. So this right here is a map using colours that shows each different country around the world and how developed they are. The blue areas, as you can see, have a higher number in the key, therefore they are more developed in terms of income, education, life expectancy, etc. Whereas countries that are red and orange are less so. So what you could do if you get a question like this, like a 3-marker, is that you see that areas that are less developed tend to be in Africa, Central Sub-Saharan Africa, parts of Asia, maybe to, some like parts of South America too, whereas the blue areas tend to be in the northern hemisphere, so the north of the equator, with the exception of Australia, of course. Then you also have Japan in Asia, is the only one that's dark blue, really. Then you have much of Europe and North America, okay? So, for example, you can see here, Norway's got a score of 0.53, 0.953, I should say. Whereas Burundi has a score of 0.417. So the idea here is this: nearer to 1, the country, the more developed. The nearer to 0, the less developed. Okay? So the reasons for trends might be, for example, large economies, maybe advancing technology in these countries. Depends how cities and towns are structured, whether they have free education or not, whether they have universities or not. for example. Now this stuff here should be a doll, because I remember I taught this to you. Okay, if you're in year 10 or 11 now, I taught this to you in year 9. So, the demographic transition model. Over time, a country develops going from stage 1 to 5. Okay, going from left to right over along here. When you're in stage 1, you're a poor country, you have a low population because everyone is dying effectively. It's a high death rate. So lots of births because there's no contraception, or certainly a lack of contraception, I should say. It's better English. A lack of contraception and a lack of women in careers. Therefore, there's a high birth rate in stage 1. But there's also a high death rate because there's not very good healthcare. As you develop, this healthcare gets better as the death rate, that purple line there, goes down. And then as you get to stage 3 and particularly 4, the birth rate is also low because now you're starting to get more contraception, now you're starting to get more women in careers, for example. And as you ultimately develop from stage 1 to 4, the population of your country increases because more people are surviving, less infant mortality, more life expectancy is higher, for example, until you get to stage 5, where it starts to go down again because people are choosing to have less children. So whether you're a small population or whether it's about large population, it goes over time. Now there is an inequality. Obviously, there are countries in stage 1, there are countries in stage 5 around the world. For example, Germany is a good one in stage 5. So you can see here that the equator, southern hemisphere, northern hemisphere, plays a part. Now this line here, in terms of where the split is, north and south usually, it's called the Brandt line, and it divides its developing and developed countries on the graphs. So the northern hemisphere, countries above that black line there, so including the likes of Japan over here and Australia over here, are developed, whereas the ones below tend to be less so. So there's an inequality. Now what causes this inequality? Well, ultimately social causes, for example levels of education, are not the same. University isn't the same. If you have less education and less university, then you're going to have less people able to do certain jobs that require a skill set. Therefore, what do? You have to get people in from a different country. People have to migrate to your country to work for you, and normally you pay more for this. Healthcare is not the same, okay? Even geographically speaking, physically, mosquitoes, I know for a fact from where I am now, prefer hot, humid climates like South America and Asia and Africa. And they can carry diseases. This gives countries that are hotter and maybe poorer a disadvantage because they have to deal with malaria, whereas in the UK you don't really. Then you're looking at history, for example. So historically, countries have changed in terms of their development. Now the British Empire, as a result of the British Empire, whether you think it's good or bad or whatever, it doesn't really matter. Ultimately, you know that the UK has benefited from that. There's a reason why English is spoken widely around the world. There's a reason why the UK has access to so many things. There's a reason why historically countries had roads and schools built, but also have suffered since. You know, empire, slavery, the Commonwealth, things like that. History plays a part. If your country has a history of wars and poverty and famine, then you're going to be struggling. If your history is prosperous and good and strong, then you're going to have most likely a better chance of being more developed. Okay? Now, Britain took advantage of countries with less development to use the resources, like the Caribbean and African countries, for example. But it wasn't just England, it was the British Empire, it was also, Portugal, France, and other countries like that, Italy as well. So colonialism basically played a part. The fact that the UK changed what an area was like back in the day has an effect on what it's like today. Socially, historically, now environmentally. So environmental causes of inequality. Climate is a very easy one. Some areas rain more than others. Therefore, if you can rain, then you're going to get better farming, better food, more development. If you haven't got resources, for example, like rain, natural weather, natural climate, then you're going to have to import certain foods or use technology to grow foods in these conditions. If you haven't got that tech because you haven't got the money for it, then you're going to struggle and you have to import more money. Also, in terms of natural climate, what fossil fuels are there around you? What waterborne diseases are there with you? Again, feel free to pause the video at any time to make some notes on what is on the screen right now. But ultimately, weather and climate play a really big part in development. Now, yes, the climate in, for example, Saudi Arabia is hot, dry, and difficult to grow things. But the reason why they have money now to compete with the likes of the USA and the UK in hosting sports events, for example, is because they have oil, so they have natural resources like that, for example. So they can overcome the issues like droughts. Other countries in sub-Saharan Africa haven't got the money to deal with problems like this. Extreme weather, hurricanes. This comes back to natural hazards. If you live near the equator, you're more likely to experience a hurricane. If you live near the coast, you're more likely to experience a hurricane. If you live near a plate boundary, you're more likely to experience an earthquake. But then there's also political causes of inequality. So governance, for example, corruption. Governments, if they are certainly aligned, will have certain values, whereas if they're otherwise aligned, they'll have different values. And this varies from country to country. Capitalist versus communist, for example. So capitalist is more about money growth, communist is more about being even. So stereotypically, if you are in a capitalist society, it's more about having chain restaurants, having business, having money, and you get really rich people, and then often a lot of inequality. The idea and theory behind a communist government like Russia, China, and North Korea is that it's a lot more even. It doesn't always work out that way, by the way. But yes, for example, UK, USA, Germany are capitalist governments. They're looking to make money through business, through trade. Communist is a little bit different. And international relations. So, for example, Russia right now are suffering in terms of development because countries are not trading with them as much because of their relations in terms of the war with Ukraine. For example, the same can be said of Israel, to be honest with you. Countries haven't got positive relationships with some. Palestine as well is an example of a country that hasn't got positive relations with everybody. Therefore, they're going to suffer in terms of trade and development with that, and also aid. So the causes. So what happens as a result? I'll leave this one on here, as you can see, because it's a really good revision tool. But ultimately, what are the consequences of all these inequalities? Well, houses are very expensive. So family, you might have to live somewhere else. People have to move for job opportunities. People have to move because they're on low-paid work. Or, if you're in a really poor area, you rely on low-paid work because that's all there is. If everywhere's built up, there's lots of rubbish and litter. There's more crime. If, for example, we have to move away from the city because there's more crime in London, for example, than there is in parts of rural England. In the city, there are roads are congested, the health is maybe impacted because of the air quality, and there's not enough maybe teachers, not enough builders, not enough doctors in the cities because there's too many people there. Now, these are reasons to move away from the city. In other words, these are push factors. These are push factors that push people away from the city. Now, people can migrate from country to country. That's called international migration. And that could be also as a result of push factors. So, for example, if you're poor in the country you're in, if you're suffering war, then you might want to move to somewhere that has better quality of life for you and your family. So push factors are things that make you leave an area. Yeah, so for example, intensive work that's not well paid, access to services limited, so less doctors, less services, less police. That's a push factor, making you want to leave an area. However, pull factors are things that make you want to go to a place. So, for example, in some cities, there's higher paid jobs. So that might be a reason to move to an urban area from a rural one. Better education, better public transport, more entertaining, more shops, cinemas, clubs, cafes, restaurants, bars, whatever it may be. So there's pull factors, which are things to make you want to go to an area. So not all pull factors are as they seem, by the way. It can be like a case of a dream. People come to London expecting to live the life of luxury, but actually struggle worse because it's more expensive than where they were before. So international migration can actually worsen inequality and cause problems for the city they're in terms of, losing workers, services declining, and having to use services more. But the aim is to improve development. So it can be the government or it can be NGO, non-government organisations, otherwise known as charities, that can help with aid. There can also be development projects like large-scale expensive constructions that try and basically do up an area, regenerate an area, i.e. Canary Wharf. Try and make the area better clean water, better electricity, maybe cleaner, greener energy, for example. So examples you could use are the Three Gorges Dam, a major dam to store clean water and also produce electricity. Or, look at Rio, favela replacement, making new houses where the shantytowns were. Or in the UK, you got HS2, where you're building railway lines to improve commuting, so people can live further away and commute inwards. The Eden Project, down in Cornwall, in the southwest of England, not far from where I'm from. Tourist attractions providing new jobs and profits for the area, so you can get money into an area. And then Egypt's, you got the New Cairo, the plan to replace the overflowing current capital Cairo with new houses, making more money, but often pricing people out. Now these schemes can have mixed impacts. They can be good and bad. In terms of good, they're large scale, so lots of jobs, lots of benefits, lots of tourism. However, some locals can have little voice, so local residents might not get all the rights that they had before. Also, they might be priced out because it becomes more expensive. And also, it costs millions, if not billions of pounds to do this. And where's that money coming from? Usually tax. Investments too, but mainly tax. So it's going to take a long time to pay off. It can also have bad environmental effects, for example, lots of CO2 in making these things. And tourism isn't all year. So sometimes if you're working in the tourism sector, you might only be working in the summer months. Whereas if you have a reliable job that happens all the way through the year, then you're guaranteed more of an income. So there's also aid development projects. So you got Haifa, Water Aid, Team Uganda, Debt Relief, Fair Trade and Microfinance Loans. Have a little look at these things here. I'll leave that screen on for you to pause. But ultimately, these are 6 different ways that you can develop through aid, smaller projects. These are things that charities do. So, a charity to give a family a goat for milk and food to make money. Haifa. Water Aids provides water pumps for a small village. Team Uganda tries to inspire the community through volunteers. Debt Relief helps countries that are in debt. Fair Trade helps farmers get a fair wage. And microfinance loans basically help people with not very much money start a business to start generating some money. Again, this has positives and negatives. So, these projects tend to focus on the poorest families, which is good. It's quite cheap, so charities can afford it. However, it's not sustainable because they rely on voluntary donations. So they're not actually going to get guaranteed income. They also can't help everybody because they only have a certain amount of money coming in from donations. And also, without proper training and planning, they could be unsuccessful. So they might be given a cow or a goat, but in time that goat might die very quickly if it's not treated right, if it's not fed right, if it's not watered right. So each scheme has costs and benefits, and you may very well be asked about the advantages and disadvantages of each. And that is ultimately a brief revision with some examples in here and stuff as well. Now go back and watch that video, pause it where you need to, make notes where you need to. But the key thing to remember here is that you can use your case studies in there too. You have to, in fact, use your case studies too. So whether you're learning about Nigeria or Kenya or the UK, which I presume you will be at some point, you have to use these and apply them directly to what I've just said. This 18 minutes here or so is about the theory. It's about some key information, some key definitions, some measures of development, and how the world is changing and how inequalities are forming as a result. However, you have to use your case studies in this to make your answer better, to make your knowledge applicable to an answer. If you get asked, for example, about the winners and losers of economic development, that's where you'd bring in your case study, but use these ideas as a foundation to build upon. Okay? So, hopefully this video was very good as a basic outline. I still haven't had anyone comment on your case studies yet, so please comment below which case studies you are doing for this topic. If you don't know, then ask your teacher or find out, or just wait until you find out. But ultimately, I'm hoping this video was a very useful indicator. Hopefully you can use this to revise throughout the next few months. If you're looking back at this in May, it might be quite a useful way just to brush up on the old key concepts. And again, my last top tip for this video, please pause this, make some notes and watch it multiple times. If you can start to try and test yourself, start to remember, for example, if I say what are the economic indicators, you can hopefully pause it, go back and actually find out, and then the next time you remember what the development indicators are, you remember what the information is about your case study, for example. Watch it multiple times, have a think about what some answers might be, and ultimately build up your knowledge and make it better so you remember it better for the exam. Any questions, as always, please put them down below. I still miss you guys very much. I'm hoping to come back and see you guys sometime in the summer term. I definitely will at some point, I promise you, and I'll see you soon. Take care for now, alright? See you soon.